Have you ever noticed that the workouts that leave you gasping, shaking, and sore are also the ones that make you feel most alive? Or that a cup of strong coffee or pre-workout makes you feel amped for a big lift? Stress has a bad reputation, yet those examples show it can be both painful and rewarding. The key to understanding this paradox is hormesis, the idea that just the right amount of stress makes us stronger, while too little or too much can be harmful. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore what hormesis is, how it applies to training, nutrition, and stimulants, and why recovery is the other side of the equation. By the end, you'll see how to harness stress strategically to build muscle, gain strength, and improve performance without burning out. Let's start by defining hormesis and why it matters. Hormesis describes a U-shaped or bell-shaped response to stressors. Too little stress does nothing. The right amount stimulates growth and resilience, and too much inhibits function or causes damage. Sunlight is a classic example. A few minutes of sunshine produce vitamin D and boost mood, while hours of unprotected exposure cause burns and increase skin cancer risk. Strength training applies mechanical stress to muscle fibers. If you don't train at all, you stagnate, but if you push too hard, you get injured. Cold plunges or sauna sessions apply thermal stress. Brief exposures activate adaptive pathways, whereas extreme cold or heat can lead to hypothermia or heat stroke. Even caffeine acts as a hormetic stressor. Understanding hormesis helps us appreciate that stress isn't inherently bad. It's a tool when used wisely. Next, let's visualize the Hormesis curve and where the sweet spot lies. If you graph stress on the horizontal axis and adaptation on the vertical axis, you see a U-shaped curve. At the left, where stress is too low, nothing changes, muscles don't grow, endurance doesn't improve, and metabolism stagnates. As stress increases into a moderate zone, adaptation climbs. You get stronger, fitter, and more resilient. But beyond that sweet spot, the curve drops. Excess stress leads to injury, burnout, and illness. The goal of effective training and lifestyle design is to stay in that middle zone where stress is challenging but not overwhelming. This sweet spot will look different for each person and can change over time as you adapt. With that framework in mind, let's look at some everyday examples to make the concept concrete. Sunlight is the quintessential hormetic stressor. 15 minutes of sun several times per week is enough to synthesize vitamin D and improve mood. But too little leads to deficiency and too much causes burns and increases cancer risk. Exercise works similarly. Moderate training improves cardiovascular health, builds stronger muscles, and boosts mental clarity. A sedentary lifestyle leads to decline, but overtraining invites injury, chronic soreness, and hormonal dysregulation. Cold plunges activate brown fat, increasing metabolic efficiency, while sauna sessions induce heat shock proteins that aid recovery and longevity. Yet extremes in temperature can cause hypothermia or heat stroke. These examples show that the dosage and context of stress matter. Next, we'll focus specifically on exercise as a stressor and how it triggers adaptations. Training is a controlled form of stress. When I lift weights or run, I apply forces that disturb the equilibrium inside my body. Resistance training imposes mechanical stress through load and tension, causing micro tears in muscle fibers. High rep sets and intense cardio create metabolic stress, with energy demand and metabolic buildup signaling my cells. Heavy efforts also require high neural drive as my central nervous system recruits motor units to produce force. These three stressors, mechanical, metabolic, and neural, challenge my body's homeostasis. In response, my body adapts. Muscles grow stronger, mitochondria multiply, and neural efficiency improves. In the next slides, we'll unpack each type of stress and the signaling pathways they activate. Mechanical stress is all about tension and microtrauma. When I lift heavy weights, my muscle fibers stretch and microscopic tears form. This controlled damage isn't catastrophic. It's a signal that stimulates anabolic pathways like mTOR and P70S6K, as well as hormones like IGF-1. These pathways increase protein synthesis and lead to thicker muscle fibers and stronger connective tissue. The body repairs the microtears during recovery, building back stronger than before so I can handle similar stress more easily in the future. This process is why progressive overload works. Mechanical stress is the primary driver of hypertrophy, but it's not the only signal. Metabolic stress also plays a significant role, which we'll explore next. Metabolic stress comes from the buildup of lactate, hydrogen ions, and other metabolites when my muscles are working hard, especially during high rep sets or when blood flow is restricted. These metabolites activate signaling pathways like AMPK, P38 MAPK, and PGC1 alpha. AMPK senses low energy and promotes mitochondrial biogenesis, while P38 MAPK and PGC1 alpha support metabolic adaptations and endurance. Some research also links metabolic stress to hypertrophy via cellular swelling and fiber recruitment. In short, metabolic stress complements mechanical stress, where heavy loads tear fibers, high reps flood them with metabolites that tell my body to build more mitochondria and store more fuel. Next, let's consider how stress affects my nervous and hormonal systems. When I train, my brain perceives a challenge and activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which tells the adrenal glands to release cortisol and catecholamines like adrenaline and noradrenaline. These hormones increase alertness, release fuel, and prepare my body for action. An acute burst during training is beneficial. It heightens focus and energy. But if cortisol stays high for too long or catecholamines remain elevated, my immune system weakens, my recovery suffers, and stress becomes damaging. Recognizing this duality helps me balance training intensity with adequate recovery. On the next slide, we'll see how stress, recovery, and adaptation fit together. Adaptation is a three-step process. First comes stress: training, caffeine, cold exposure, or any stimulus that disrupts homeostasis. During the workout, I'm not getting stronger. I'm tearing down tissue and exhausting my systems. Second is recovery. Sleep, nutrition, and rest allow my body to restore balance. This is when protein synthesis ramps up, glycogen stores are replenished, and my nervous system resets. Third is adaptation. As I recover, my body overcompensates, leading to a higher baseline of strength, endurance, or metabolic capacity. Without adequate recovery, stress just accumulates and becomes damaging. With this framework in mind, let's examine the specific adaptations associated with muscle growth and strength. When it comes to building muscle, not all stress is equal. Mechanical stress, heavy lifting that stretches and damages muscle fibers, accounts for the majority of the hypertrophic stimulus. Metabolic stress, produced by high reps and the accumulation of metabolites, provides a significant secondary signal that enhances muscle growth by promoting cellular swelling and fiber recruitment. The best programs combine both: heavy compound lifts to maximize mechanical tension and higher rep accessory work or techniques like drop sets to tap into metabolic stress. Together, these stressors stimulate maximal protein synthesis, leading to larger muscles. But muscle size isn't the only measure of progress. Strength gains involve the nervous system, which we'll cover next. Early strength gains often occur without significant increases in muscle size, because my nervous system becomes more efficient. I learn to recruit more motor units and fire them more rapidly, leading to greater force output. Improved intermuscular coordination allows different muscles and muscle groups to work together seamlessly. Training specificity matters. Practicing heavy singles improves maximal strength, while speed work enhances rate of force development. As neural adaptations plateau, hypertrophy contributes to further strength gains. Understanding the neural component reminds me that changes inside my head and spinal cord are just as important as changes in muscle fibers. Next, we'll turn our attention to recovery, the essential partner to stress. Recovery is not passive, it's a deliberate part of the training cycle. Quality sleep is when my body releases growth hormone, repairs tissues, and consolidates motor learning. Proper nutrition provides the building blocks: protein for repair, carbohydrates to replenish glycogen, and healthy fats to support hormones. Stress management techniques like meditation or light activity keep my nervous system from being chronically activated. Additional recovery methods such as stretching, massage, and contrast therapy with cold and heat can alleviate soreness and promote circulation. Without these practices, the stress I impose through training never translates into progress. The next slide simplifies this concept. Stress plus recovery equals progress. The equation is simple. Stress plus recovery equals progress. Training alone does not make me stronger. In fact, it temporarily weakens me by depleting energy stores and damaging tissues. Recovery alone also fails to stimulate growth. If I don't challenge myself, I simply maintain. When I pair a challenging workout with adequate recovery, my body restores itself and then overcompensates, leaving me better than before. This understanding helps me avoid the trap of thinking more is always better. Instead, I aim for the right amount of stress and invest time and resources into recovery. With this balanced approach in mind, let's explore how mild stressors like caffeine fit into the picture. Caffeine acts as a mild hormetic stressor. By blocking adenosine receptors in my brain, it prevents me from feeling tired and increases neural firing. This action indirectly causes the release of catecholamines like adrenaline and noradrenaline, raising cortisol and blood pressure transiently. At moderate doses, about 2 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, caffeine enhances alertness, reaction time, and endurance. At high doses, especially above 9 milligrams per kilogram or around 400 milligrams in a short period, caffeine can cause jitteriness, anxiety, and interfere with sleep. Recognizing caffeine's place on the hormesis curve helps me use it wisely. Next, we'll consider the benefits of moderate stimulant use. Used judiciously, stimulants like caffeine can enhance performance. They sharpen alertness and focus, making it easier to concentrate on technical lifts or complex skills. By increasing motor unit recruitment and reducing perceived effort, they can boost power output and endurance, helping me squeeze out a few more reps or sustain high intensity. Stimulants also elevate dopamine levels, improving mood and making training feel more engaging. These benefits, however, are dose dependent. Too little and I may not notice a difference. Too much and the negatives outweigh the positives. The next slides will illustrate when stimulants can be helpful and when they may hinder progress. There are times when a moderate dose of stimulants makes a noticeable difference. Before a heavy competition lift or a testing day, they can amplify adrenaline just enough to unlock maximal strength. In the early morning, when circadian drive is low, caffeine can counteract grogginess and improve concentration. During long endurance events, moderate caffeine helps sustain mental endurance and spare glycogen by encouraging my body to burn more fat. In these contexts, a carefully measured dose can elevate performance without significant downsides. But stimulants aren't a magic bullet. Used indiscriminately, they can backfire, as we'll see next. Overusing stimulants leads to diminishing returns. My body builds tolerance, meaning I need larger doses to achieve the same effect, which blunts the stress response and diminishes the hormetic benefits. High doses late in the day disrupt sleep, undermining recovery and adaptation. Excess catecholamines elevate heart rate and blood pressure, triggering anxiety, jitters, and even cardiovascular issues. Dependence can also develop, where workouts feel impossible without a stimulant. Recognizing these drawbacks helps me use caffeine and other stimulants strategically, as an occasional performance enhancer rather than a daily crutch. Beyond stimulants, chronic stress from overtraining can also be harmful, which we'll cover next. When stress exceeds my recovery capacity for too long, overtraining and overstress set in. Physically, I experience chronic soreness, declining strength, and frequent injuries. Mentally, irritability, anxiety, or depression creep in, and my motivation plummets. Physiologically, insomnia, elevated resting heart rate, and suppressed immunity are red flags. These symptoms indicate that I've moved past the hormetic sweet spot into the overload zone. At this point, continuing to push only digs the hole deeper. Recognizing the signs of excessive stress allows me to step back, adjust my training, and prioritize recovery before serious damage occurs. Let's look at specific indicators that too much stress is building up. The body sends signals when stress is accumulating. Persistent fatigue, even after adequate sleep, suggests my systems aren't recovering. A plateau or regression in strength and size indicates that my training stimulus is no longer producing adaptation because the recovery side of the equation is lacking. Sleep disruption, including trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, is another warning sign, as is a consistently elevated resting heart rate. Mood changes like irritability, anxiety, or loss of motivation also point to overstress. Paying attention to these signs lets me adjust my training load and life stressors before they spiral into overtraining. So how do I find this sweet spot? The next slide offers some strategies. Finding the right balance between stress and recovery involves planning. I progressively overload my training by gradually adding weight or reps rather than making giant leaps. I periodize my workload, cycling between heavy, moderate, and deload weeks to allow systems to recover. I treat stimulants like caffeine as tools, using them strategically for tough sessions rather than daily. Most importantly, I respect recovery. I schedule consistent sleep, eat to fuel and rebuild, and plan rest days and active recovery to let my body adapt. By actively managing both sides of the hormesis curve, I can stay in the sweet spot and continue progressing without burning out. Next, we'll see how these principles apply to different athletic goals. Different athletes require different stress and recovery strategies. A powerlifter thrives on high mechanical stress and low volume. They might save caffeine for maximal attempts and prioritize long rest periods and ample sleep to recover from heavy loads. A CrossFitter or hybrid athlete blends mechanical and metabolic stress. Cycling intensities, using moderate caffeine before tough metcons and incorporating varied recovery modalities like stretching and cold plunges, can keep their system balanced. An endurance athlete faces high metabolic and oxidative stress. They should build mileage gradually, fuel adequately, hydrate well, and consider periodic caffeine for long events, while ensuring adequate downtime. Tailoring stress, stimulants, and recovery to your specific goals maximizes progress. Next, we'll recap the key lessons. In summary, stress is not inherently bad. It's the dose that determines whether it builds you up or breaks you down. Hormesis follows a U-shaped curve. Too little stress means stagnation. A moderate amount drives adaptation, and too much causes regression or injury. Training combines mechanical, metabolic, and neural stressors, and the body adapts only when recovery is adequate. Quality sleep, nutrition, rest, and stress management are essential parts of the process. Stimulants like caffeine can enhance performance when used strategically, but should not replace proper training or recovery. By respecting the balance between stress and recovery, you can harness the right amount of stress to grow stronger and avoid overstimulation. Let's wrap up with a final thought. The overarching lesson is simple. The right amount of stress builds you, and too much breaks you. Use the principles of Hormesis to challenge yourself in the gym and in life. Then give yourself the sleep, nutrition, and downtime to adapt. Don't chase endless intensity or stimulant highs. Instead, seek the sweet spot where your body thrives. If you found this presentation helpful, subscribe for more evidence-based performance insights. Comment with your experiences finding your own sweet spot, and share this information to help others train smarter. Together, we can make stress a tool for growth instead of a trigger for burnout.